Alright, and welcome to my Nioh 2 level 1 no damage or no hits minimalist run boss fight compilation. You could consider it a guide, but I think it's more appropriate to call it a detailed explanation of how I managed to make it through this challenge. I certainly don't advise anyone to try this themselves. I think that the word that best describes the difficulty of this playthrough would be the word unreasonable. So, what are the limitations of this run? Well, it entails no armor, no items, meaning also no magic or ninjutsu, no yokai skills and no yokai shift, while taking either no damage or no hits. And if you wonder what's the difference between no damage and no hit, well, for two of the boss fights, namely Kasha and Shibata Katsui, there's fire on the floor, which is almost unavoidable under these restrictions. So in those fights I do take some fire damage, but no hits from the boss's attacks. For the other fights, no hits automatically implies no damage as well. Now when it comes to the no items restriction, I did make an exception for the final boss, where I use weapon buffs to deal with his giant health bar. Otherwise I think I literally would have gone insane, or insaner. And that is with the benefit of this character being reverted to level 1 with the Book of Reincarnation, so I'm already better off than when starting with a brand new character. Now unlike in my minimalist run for Nioh 1, I'm not using dual wooden swords, because as far as I know, those cannot be found or forged in this game. At least I never acquired them. So my choice of weapon is mainly the Black Lotus, which is Mumio's switchglaive, one infused with poison and another with fire. And another weapon that I use to a lesser extent is the Dancing Blade, which is Okune's weapon, which is infused with lightning. So why do I use these weapons? I don't know. In fact, I definitely shouldn't have, because for some of the fights, other weapon types would have been more effective. And for some of the bosses, I did end up using either an Odachi or dual swords. And for the first, second and fourth boss fight, I used the singular wooden sword, just for the hell of it. As for Guardian Spirits, the only really useful one is the bird that you start off with, because of the stamina regeneration. And the secondary one is the Lightning Elephant, to give me at least a little bit of toughness. Because it's not the case that the lack of armor makes no difference if you don't take damage anyway. It makes a huge difference, because without it, you lose massive amounts of ki when blocking attacks. In fact, some attacks become unblockable due to lack of armor, or at least completely deplete your ki. Alright, let's get started with the first boss fight. So first up is Horse Gascoigne, also known as Mezuki. I'm in high stance for the entire fight, because you can affect iframe his side swipes, even with the rolling animation. In fact, ironically, sometimes I think it's easier to dodge in high stance, because the dodge animation isn't so short, and I have a tendency to dodge too early. In high stance he also takes a lot of ki damage. Basically the main rule in these types of games is to get behind the boss, but remember that this is a horse, so he can double kick right behind him. So be ready to either dodge or block as soon as he crouches down. Another way he can attack behind him is with his 360 attack. And he can actually even do that without ki, and I only narrowly managed to block it. When he goes to the Dark Realm, his attacks become too fast to dodge through, so move away from him. That also helps to counter his burst attack, since you need to aim for his third attack in that combo. He won't stay in Dark Realm for long, because his main weakness is the amount of ki damage he takes. His projectiles can quite easily be outrun by side strafing, 2 orbs in regular mode and 3 in the Dark Realm. His second burst attack, where he charges you with his horns, can very easily be countered by burst countering into him. Remember, I'm using a feral spirit, so I'm using the timing of that type of burst counter. And that's basically already it. In Dark Realm he can also make 2 waves go across the floor, but that's also a matter of simply side strafing. So the only really dangerous part is whenever you are away from him and you try to get close. It's best to simply wait until he's finished with an attack or a combo before closing that distance. Pretty straightforward fight, but unlike some of the later bosses, this one is fair and well designed, and I wish that was true about all bosses in this game. Alright, Enenra. The difficulty with this boss is one you'll encounter a lot throughout this game, and that is that he can either break off his combos or follow up in multiple ways. Meaning that even though you know his moveset, he will still be unpredictable. For example, he can do this 4-hit sideswipe combo, but he can also do it 3 times, or only twice. Or immediately follow up by falling down. So the way to deal with that is to either wait to see if he does the full combo, so you know it's safe, or simply take risks. In general, the former is definitely the better strategy. He will practically always start the exact same way, so run behind him for some free hits. Then he did the side swipes and he did it 3 times followed by him falling down. Be careful, that has a large hitbox in front of him. And the same goes for the jump attack. Very large hitbox, so immediately move back when he jumps up. Side strafe the tornadoes, but stay as close as he will allow you to stay to him. Because you don't want him to teleport when the tornadoes are out, because the camera and the lock-on might literally steer you right into those tornadoes. And he is much more likely to teleport when you are far away from him. Regardless, he might do it anyway, and he did in this fight. Now when he teleports, he will always kick twice, but he can leave a pause between the kicks. Usually when he kicks without a sideswipe preceding it. When you break his ki, don't get greedy with your attacks, because his transition into the Dark Realm has a hitbox as he summons a tornado around him during that transition. Now within the Dark Realm, his attacks are basically the same, just faster. And as you can see, he can still decide to teleport when you stay close when the tornadoes are out. And he also left a small pause in between his kicks this time. Now I didn't do it in this fight, but you can actually bait him to destroy the pillars to make water fall down. That causes a lot of ki damage and lowers his defenses because of the water effect. And that's especially helpful when you do use items, because that way you can have 2 elements active at once, causing confusion. And that's basically the most powerful status effect. That's basically it. He has way more health than necessary for a second boss, but it's much easier to fight him in mid-stance, meaning you're not using your maximal damage output, but this is not a fight where you want to have the rolling animation. And here at the end I of course show my stats to show that I'm at level 1. I forgot to do that with Mezuki and later on against Yoshimoto. But for the other bosses I fortunately remembered to actually do this. But enough of the wooden sword, it's time for a higher damage output. So I'll be using the dancing blade against Yatsu-No-Kami. And the main design flaw of this boss is that you cannot lock onto his arms. He has 2 lock-on points, but not his arms. So you have to really awkwardly maneuver yourself so that when you aim towards his center, you will actually hit the arm. No idea why they designed it this way, but I wanted that with a lot of things in this game. Fortunately, you can immediately remove his left arm when the fight starts. And make sure that you don't break his ki before destroying his other arm, because then those tiny snakes won't bother you during the Dark Realm phase. And remember that I said that I actually sometimes have an easier time dodging in high stance? Well, that's especially applicable to this boss, because with the slower rolling animation, you can dodge with relative ease through his tail. So that way you can stay close to him after removing his arms. The timing is a bit weird though, you have to dodge a little bit earlier than you would expect. At least when you're dodging when you're in front of him. Now his projectiles cannot be blocked without armor unless you get really lucky. It depends on which of the 2 projectile attacks he does, and it depends on how many you get hit by and from what distance, but simply don't expect that you will survive when blocking. In the Dark Realm, without his arm snakes roaming around, the fight is basically the same. Now I choose not to counter his burst attack head slam, because I almost always mistime it. And there's not really that much of a benefit to breaking his ki anyway. Now when it comes to dodging his tail, the timing is different when you are behind him, because then you have to dodge a bit faster. And as you will notice, when I'm in front of him, I tend to move right first before dodging left, so I'm not too far to the left, since that is the direction that the tail always comes from. And when he does the grab attack, indicated by the black smoke, that attack is quite delayed, so you have to dodge pretty late. Now of course, timing is not really something you can explain, it simply takes a lot of practice. But in my experience, staying close and dodging through his tail or grab attack is the most effective strategy, and it makes sure that the fight doesn't drag on for too long. Oh, and the tail slam in front of him is just that, in front of him. He doesn't aim that attack, so often you don't even have to roll, just side strafing is enough. So to reiterate, to hit his arms, move sideways and get the arm in between you and the lock-on indicator. And stay away from him until he gives you the opportunity to get close, because he definitely has the reach advantage. The safest time is when he stabs his arms into the ground, so run and counterattack after the second head appears. And the hardest is when he does the homing version of the projectiles, because without armor you will have to roll through those, and that has pretty strict timing actually.
Oh, また魚が一匹増えたようじゃ。
Alright, the stupid lighting clown with black teeth. This boss has insane hyper armor. So the way to deal with that is to fight like a kite. So basically the opposite of how we fought the previous boss. But fighting like a kite is pretty much my favorite strategy in this game in particular. Side strafe the lightning AoE and then only attack after he finishes a combo. He mainly has two hit combos, he does a lot when he has his dual swords out. So stay away and then quickly counterattack and move back again. Don't get greedy because he can actually block and then kick you, which does damage and that's illegal. Now his spear combos are actually a lot more difficult to recognize, so I miss a lot of opportunities in this fight. What you basically want to look out for is his grab attack or combos that end in an overhead attack. If you want to play it safe, you can use a single triangle attack to counter, because that is a stab, so you keep some distance. His arrows can be dodged through, but I make a habit of closing the distance and then dodging to his side because I'm in mid stance. In high stance it's easier to roll forward, so right through the arrows, but that doesn't really apply to mid stance. However, he can also shoot his arrows straight into the air, and that is something you want to prevent as much as possible, because it's very RNG heavy if that happens to hit you. So when he has his bow out, move towards him, because then he can alter his attack from shooting upwards to shooting forward. However, this will not always work, but it will make it significantly more likely that he won't make arrows rain down on you. Now, you can side strafe the arrow rain, but depending on where you are in this rather small arena, that's simply not guaranteed to work. Now, he doesn't have a lot of health, but you don't have a lot of opportunities to attack in the first place, so this fight is basically a matter of patience.
なかやりおるではないか。
よし、あれだ。俺に任せろ。
Alright, Kamaitachi. This beast was, well, a beast of a boss in the beta demo. I had a really hard time with it back then, but for some reason that's not the case in the final game. Now there are two principles to keep in mind. Try to stay close to him whenever you can, and if he's at a distance, rely on blocking. Which even works without armor, because even though he will likely completely drain your ki, it's rare for him to hit you twice from a distance. And when you're close, he either attacks right in front of him, so it's a matter of pushing yourself to his side, or he will do a 360 attack. And again, even if blocking drains all of your ki, you will likely recover fast enough before he has a chance to attack again. Also, if you stay close to his sides, you pretty much automatically dodge the tornadoes he summons. Now, one tricky thing he can do is his burst attack with his tail, and that attack is incredibly delayed. So you really have to force yourself to not use your burst counter too early. When he goes into the Dark Realm, the fight doesn't change that much, although he is more likely to create distance, because he can start teleporting all over the place. So remember, block his attacks. Don't even try to dodge anything he does from a distance. And when you are able to get close again, the fight basically just continues like before. One final thing is when he gets up in the trees, he can shoot a projectile or do the spinning attack, and both can be blocked. Or he can do another burst attack, which is much easier to burst counter than the one he does on the ground with his tail. But again, it is slightly delayed, so don't counter too early. But again, the timing window is much more lenient than the tail version. So far all bosses were well designed, but the next one isn't. This boss is shit. And if you're playing on level 1 with a character reverted to level 1 using the Book of Reincarnation, you have the luxury of skipping this stage altogether, and my advice is to simply do that. This boss has no redeeming qualities. On a normal playthrough it's just boring and she looks stupid, but on level 1 doing it without taking any damage is just a clusterfuck. This boss completely lacks consistency and has unfair, untelegraphed bullshit attacks that are so fast that you can't possibly react to them. So in the end you'll just end up cheesing her anyway. So first let me show you how you should fight this boss, and then how you could, but shouldn't. So what you do is that you maximize your damage output, use mid stance, and use a technique I like to call guard dodging. Meaning either dodge from a guard position, so dodge while holding L1, or dodge into a guard position. So block directly after the dodge animation. So it's all about making sure that she doesn't get the first hit in, or hit you immediately after you dodge. Still, no guarantee of success, but it will make this fight less of a pain. Then when she goes into the Dark Realm, you basically need luck. Because the Phantom form is an absolute nightmare. The feral form is fast but at least doable, but the brute form is slow and quite easy to kite and attack from a distance with the scythe in high stance, so triangle attacks. And a kiting strategy focusing on strong attacks with the scythe will basically be my go-to strategy for a lot of upcoming boss fights. Now, another way you could do this fight but shouldn't is with a sword and use a similar kiting strategy. Basically make a run into your strong attack and then keep your distance again. This way you only have to worry about projectile attacks or the EI attack from the dual swords, which is still an RNG nightmare, but it's better than trying to dodge through her attacks. Basically, regardless of how you want to approach this fight, it's going to be boring and some sort of cheese strategy. This fight truly has no redeeming qualities. If you can skip this boss, skip it. It really isn't worth it. Well, the next boss could have been great, but there is one single aspect that completely 100% ruins this boss. And that's the orb that you need to destroy during the Dark Realm phases. Complete RNG bullshit. Because you cannot focus on the boss while attacking the orb, because first of all you cannot even see anything. And secondly, the orb starts shooting homing projectiles if you don't destroy it quickly enough. So how did I do the Dark Realm phases without taking damage? Well, I literally had to try and try and try again until I got lucky enough that the boss didn't hit me in the back while I was attacking the orb. That's it. 100% RNG. Which sucks because there's nothing wrong with the boss itself. The boss fight is, in principle, very good. First, do strong attacks in high stance to destroy his eyes, which does about double damage. And always move away from the boss, so you don't have to waste ki on blocking or dodging. The safest time to counterattack is when he attacks with both of his feet. Now, other than constantly moving away from him, you need to always be ready to immediately block when he shoots feather projectiles. And the same applies when he starts flying around the area. However, he can also shoot homing projectiles in the air as well as on the ground. And if those hit at the same time as the feather projectiles, you will not have enough ki to block those without armor. So that is the main danger in the normal phase. Outrunning the homing projectiles while constantly be ready to block the feather projectiles. And when he's in the air, simply wait until he does the burst diving attack. Which unfortunately can be quite easy to miss depending on how far he's away from you. But don't attack more than twice after countering, because he recovers very quickly. And again, the Dark Realm is all about RNG. There is no strategy to prevent getting hit in the back, and that's really shitty design. Also, I have absolutely no clue why sometimes the boss gets stunned after destroying the orb, and sometimes he doesn't. What determines that? I have absolutely no clue whatsoever. Also, when you do the critical attack with your dagger, immediately move back because he recovers with a 360 spinning attack. In fact, that's another reason why you want to always move away from him and attacking with the strong attack from the scythe, because he can do that spinning attack at any time, and blocking the spinning attack likely will get you killed. And dodging it both has a really bizarre timing and can only be done by dodging away from him to begin with. So just a general rule, move away from the boss. In fact, that's the main difference between Nioh and Dark Souls. Dark Souls is all about dodging through attacks, and Nioh is all about spacing. Few exceptions, of course, we obviously already encountered some of those exceptions. And for the next boss, I practically rely solely on dodging through his attacks. Okay, so even though I am going to fight Magara Naotaka in low stance, so I can dodge through his attacks and try to inflict poison, which my Black Lotus is infused with, I'm not at all saying that is the most effective strategy for this boss. Again, even though these videos contain helpful tips, it's not meant as a step-by-step guide. This is me playing under very specific circumstances and explaining how I chose to do it. So keep that in mind. In fact, the massive irony here is that in the successful attempt, I didn't even manage to poison him in the first place. I did in the failed attempt, so it does work. And the thing with the Switchglaive low stance or Saw Cleaver mode is that it's really good for quickly building up the poison effect. But of course, without Galnoth Broth, the poison buildup is rather low. But the other helpful thing with low stance is that it helps with dodging through his attacks. Now, my advice is to dodge along with his spinning attacks, so you stay out of the hitbox altogether. But especially when he's near the edge of the arena, you don't always have a choice. Moreover, he has a combo where he alternates the direction of his swings. So you will see me doing both because it's simply a necessity sometimes. Also, I don't challenge his burst attack where he makes ice shoot up from the ground. Yeah, it is possible to counter it, but the timing is really strange and it almost always fails. And just like Enenra, be careful when he switches to the Dark Realm or back, because both transitions have an AoE attack. Speaking of which, he has two very dangerous moves. One is a burst attack where he summons a double ice AoE around him, where he punches the ground twice in a row. You need to move back and dodge into him as soon as he does the second punch. And the other one is his grab attack, and the tracking on that move is really insane. So it's easiest to dodge when you are close to him, so you can immediately push yourself past him as soon as you see the black smoke. But when he does it from a distance, your timing has to be absolutely spot on. Because if you dodge even a little too early, the tracking will automatically get you. So to reiterate, stay close and low stance, preferably dodge along with his spinning attacks, but you can also dodge through them if necessary. Be constantly on your guard for the AoEs, and if he does the grab when you're close, push yourself to his side, and if he does from a distance, dodge when he's about to grab you, not earlier than that. At least that's how I approach this fight, of course. Alright then, first 8 bosses down, but 16 more to go. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like, comment and hit that subscribe button. And if you're willing to, you can now support me on Patreon. Thanks for watching and of course, stay tuned for the next episode.